never thought about before, ideas they've never heard before, paintings they've never dreamt of before, poetry they didn't believe existed, and so many other things. Don't suppress that cultural idea, identity or ambition in everybody. Open it up, free it out. Therefore, make sure that all our children get a chance to learn music in school, that our local libraries, museums and art galleries do have enough money to stay open so they're there for everybody, because that is what makes the creativity in us so good and so strong. We heard a brilliant speech a few minutes ago about our health service. Our health service was created by people who had real vision. Imagine what it was like when you were trying to survive in the late 19th century and you got ill, and if you had a few pennies together you could possibly get a brief appointment with a doctor. Many didn't, and many died. Life expectancy was very short for working people. Life expectancy for children of the poor was often zero. So many died in childbirth. Great campaigners and great campaigns opened up local health facilities. Many trade unions did it, particularly the miners' union. They were determined that healthcare should be a right, not a privilege. And gradually that movement gained strength. But imagine how hard it was to campaign for the idea that getting ill should not be a financial penalty. Yes, none of us want to get ill. Yes, we're all fearful of being ill or injured or something else. But I want to live in a society where nobody is afraid of the bill because they get ill or injured, that we have the principle of a health service free at the point of use as a human right. Many people around the world don't have that. Much of our health service is being damaged at the present time. Damaged by the Health and Social Care Act, which allows so much of it to be put out to private tender. Damaged because of the private finance initiative contracts that are so damaging to the finances of every hospital, and those contracts are sold on to somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. But I tell you what, the health service has to keep playing. So last week, Diane Abbott and I launched our health programme at UCH Hospital, in which we said we want a Labour government to instruct the Treasury to take over and negotiate the running of those PFI contracts, bring them back in-house and stop the penalty on the National Health Service of them. And we're also determined that our health service will deal with health inequalities. Health inequalities brought about by poverty, by bad housing. Health inequalities where the life expectancy in a poor area is much shorter than in a richer area. It's not right. Everyone should have access to decent health care just as much as they should have access to decent housing. But there's also the crisis of mental health provision across the whole of this country. A quarter of us here in this wonderful gathering today on the seafront in Ramsgate, during our lives are going to go through a crisis of stress, a crisis of isolation, which could be termed a mental health crisis. Some of us will get through it with the love and affection of friends and partners, family, neighbours and community. Some of us will get the help we need very quickly from very good doctors and healthcare professionals, and we'll get the talking therapy and whatever else we need. Some of us won't. Some of us will be frightened to talk about it. Some young men particularly will be very frightened to talk about it and sadly take their own lives as a result of it because they can't talk about a problem that they're going through. And yet those that go through an emergency have to wait many months sometimes for therapy. Those that are taken to emergency accommodation, it's often so far away that family, friends and nobody else can visit them. Some of them suffer very grievously. So let's agree on two things. One, all of us, every one of us, can change our language, change our attitude, change respect towards people going through a crisis and treat it as we'd want to be treated ourselves, with decency, humanity and respect, and end the abuse of those with mental health conditions. And secondly, properly fund our mental health services so the claimed parity of esteem that the government offers becomes a reality of parity of care as well as parity of esteem. We are very, very determined to achieve that. This is at one level a contest for the leadership of the Labour Party that you're all aware of. But it's also about the way we do our politics. This is a public rally in an open space. Absolutely anybody can come. Be they a Labour supporter, hostile to Labour, disinterested in Labour, lover of Labour, just interested in politics and their ideas. I want a political process and a policy-making process that values the views of everybody, gives the chance for bottom-up decision-making, gives the chance for that kind of democracy within our party, within our unions and within our community. Real devolution across the UK. An end to the elitism by the abolition of the House of Lords and replacement with an elected upper chamber. And those that say all this is way out of touch, I simply say this. In less than 15 months, 300,000 people have been attracted to this and joined the Labour Party, making it the biggest political party in Europe, the biggest socialist party anywhere across Europe. And so, yes, we have a lot of work to do to win a general election. Yes, we have a great deal of work to do. But we win that election by uniting communities. We win that election by showing that when we come together, we can create the jobs, we can build the housing, we can run the health service, we can have the transport infrastructure, the communications infrastructure we need through broadband and all the other methods. We need and can achieve all of that. So people will grow up in the idea that the next generation doesn't automatically have to be poorer than this generation. I'm fed up with being told by apparently very brilliant economists that my generation had it so good. We had the pensions, we had the free education, we had the free university education, we had the access to housing, but sadly it's not there for the next generation, and the one after that's going to be even worse off. Why are we listening to this stuff? Why are we accepting the idea that somehow or other the way forward in economics, the way forward in social policy, the way forward in social justice is greater poverty for those at the bottom, greater inequality for all of us, and the idea that somehow or other the super rich generously will send money from their tax havens to help us pay for our public services? I simply say to the super rich, and those that think tax evasion is a good thing and taxes are only for little people, I simply say this to them. One day they're going to be old. One day they might be ill. One day they might have a heart attack. One day their car might be in a crash. One day they might desperately need the help of a police officer or somebody else. One day they might be cut out of the wreckage of a car accident by brilliant people like our friends in the firefighters. Who paid for that but all of us who paid our taxes in the proper way all this time? Who provided that concept of social justice? So I'm really proud to be here at this rally today in Thanet. I'm really proud of all the rallies we've held all over the country and all the discussions that we've had about hopes, about dreams, about democracy and about justice within our society and the way people can come together. When you turn in on each other, when you start blaming the nearest migrant family or the nearest refugee family for the problems you're in, when you start blaming somebody because they speak a different language, have a different nationality than you set off a whole circle of division, of hatred, of abuse, of nastiness, and you see the hate crime, like that poor man who died in Harlow a few days ago. And what have you achieved at the end of it? You've achieved a lot of hatred, you've achieved a lot of blame, but you've not built one house, you've not employed one doctor, you've not trained one teacher, you've not given one child a nursery place, you've achieved absolutely nothing. But when you unite a community together and say the problems of housing, the problems of education, the problems of health, the problems of work are because we live in a deeply totally unequal society. We cannot afford this level of inequality. We can afford to invest to end the inequality and tax appropriately to make sure it happens. And so, as we go back to Parliament on Monday, we'll be challenging this government on the poverty, on the inequality, challenging Theresa May on a wish to repeal the Human Rights Act and walk away from the European Convention. We will be standing up for human rights in Britain and all over the world. We'll be standing for the kind of society and kind of community we want to live in. It's this unity of bringing so many people together that in some cases is a difficult lesson for some people to understand. But once the genie is out of the bottle, once the determination of all of us together to bring about that better society, to ensure that those with disabilities are not poorer and discriminated against, those with difficulties for mental health are not discriminated against, those living in poverty can see some light at the end of the tunnel. That is the strength of this movement. That is the strength of all of us when we come together. So I conclude with this. Thank you for coming. Thank you for what you said. Thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for trying to create a decent, harmonious, socially just society in Britain and be that influence around the world. Thank you very much.
Hello. Just a quick few announcements. The first one being, take your rubbish home with you if you can